as absolutely independent as arithmetic. He may then say that he has a creative power to exhaust, and has exhausted, the previous contributions of his people. But as long as he merely uses arithmetic, he has lacked that tremendous creativity which is the basis of the wisdom of antiquity, the power to be the first to know something. Now, we may say that everything worth knowing has already been found, so we can't do it. This is untrue. There are more firsts waiting than have ever yet been revealed. But as long as we are content to use rather than to create, we have lost one dimension of thinking. And that dimension is the very thing that the Hermetic doctrine is concerned with, namely man's ability to become conscious within and of the universal mind itself, so that every individual creates with the mind of God, or with the universal divine intellect. Thus, the end of all knowing, according to the Hermetic system, is that men will not think about God or think of God, but think with God. And this statement still poses one of the most difficult situations with which the average individual can intellectually be confronted, because we cannot even understand fully what this implication actually is. But we do know that at a time less blessed than our own, when the opportunities for knowledge were much less than ours, when the instruments of available learning were far more deficient than ours, men had the creativity which established all of our great instruments of knowledge. Therefore, that this creativity lay within consciousness itself, was not acquired but was innate, and that the solution to all things lies in the innate solutional power of the universal mind in man. Now, that someone 2,000 years ago should have sounded this is important, and it is easy to see why this idea could not die, why it had to continue to exercise an influence. And it is also possible to estimate from this why this orientation could have been involved in the corpus hermeticum. The idea of this one consciousness, the author of all knowledge, this one mind, the substance of all good, and of course with it all the vision of the way in which man, through the development of the special and particular faculties of his own consciousness, might in some way and in due time attain to identity with this mind. We will learn a little later that such is the burden of the divine Paramanda, or the shepherd of men. And we know that it is the burden of that department of the Neoplatonic thinking which is called the theurgical part, namely theurgy, the magic of fulfillment, the magic of doing, the magic not of listening nor learning, but the strange power to be one with truth. So back even in that day, men dreamed of the possibility of bringing their own consciousness in rapport with the universal consciousness. And the secret books of Hermes and the mysteries of the Hermetic doctrine were in one way or another concealed in this, or were concerned with it. Thus, the moment we apply this key to alchemy, we change the entire perspective of these chemists. The transmutation of ignorance, the transmutation of not knowing into the state of pure enlightenment. The creation of the universal medicine, truth itself, which alone can heal all the sickness of ignorance wherever it is distributed. And the principal primary contribution of the Hermetic philosophy was that such a truth elixir was possible, that it was not the vain speculation of deluded persons, that it was not a hope beyond possibility, but that truth substantially was attainable. Perhaps not immediately, perhaps not totally, but that the motion toward truth was the motion toward solution of every problem, internal and external, as far as problem could beset man or any of his attributes. Thus the Hermetic arts consisted of the arts of human regeneration. There is everything to indicate that they were influenced by Buddhism. Buddhism with its noble path of renunciation. It is quite possible that the Hermetic philosophy was influenced by the earliest systems of Eastern mysticism that resulted in Yoga and Vedanta. It is quite possible and almost certain that this system was also influenced by the part of the old Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin of the Jews, which dealt with the mystery of the Merkava, or the chariot of righteousness, by means of which the prophet is transported to heaven without death. This chariot of righteousness, this chariot of Ezekiel, being the symbol of illumination, or the spiritual ecstasy by which man is moved from one world to another. Hermes himself describes this experience, or the writer of the Hermetic Doctrine creates a person and causes that person to be the personification of the truth seeker, receiving into himself the experience peculiar to those who through dedication have become worthy of the truth. Thus in the Pymander and in other Hermetic fragments, universal mind or consciousness becomes the teacher, instructing the disciple in the attainment of the great end of learning, which is the Hermetic marriage, or the Hermetic union, the union of the mortal and the immortal in an indissoluble bond of amity. In these thinkings, then, we have the grounds for many mystical speculations that were to come at later date. We see the source of a large part of Christian mysticism. We begin to see why the more illumined church fathers must have recognized the same essential doctrine that they themselves were seeking to cultivate. They must also have realized that the experience of deity is the end of all spiritual quest. And because Hermeticism, like the early church, was concerned with truth as an experience of consciousness, it could not be rejected totally, any more than the ethical experience of Plato could be rejected totally. So the orientation of our problem is historically in these centuries of change, these centuries by which certain directives arose in the thinking of man, and in the midst of these directives we see the rise of this very strange and elusive belief. A belief, however, which again never died, but became disseminated through 100 sects, even reaching into the Near East to become very important in the teachings of the dervishes and the Sufis. Thus this teaching moved in and on through time, losing its name after a very short time, but never losing its directive to the individual or its positive affirmation of the exact science of human illumination or redemption through the spiritual experience of illumination. These elements and these factors give us the orientation and will, I think, permit us to go on next week with a further analysis of the doctrine itself.